This is another historical Filipino-American video. So that it won't happen again, we should not forget the past. The Yakima Valley riot of 1927 was a violent episode of racial conflict that occurred in central Washington state. The Yakima Valley riot is an important historical event that sheds light on the experiences of Filipino Americans during a time of intense discrimination and xenophobia. The Yakima Valley riots, which occurred in the Yakima Valley of Washington state from November 8 to 11, 1927, were an outburst of anti-Filipino sentiment. The incident involved a mob of white citizens attacking and forcibly removing over 500 Filipino migrant workers from their homes. Many Filipinos living in the area lost their homes, jobs, and lives as a result of this riot. Filipinos were easy prey for radicalized and enraged whites who saw them as thieves of their women and jobs because they were unable to receive assistance or protection from the white police. Mobs of white men would beat and threaten defenseless Filipinos under the cover of night and occasionally even during the day. The Immigration Act of 1924 was the result of growing anti-Asian sentiment in the U.S. in the late 1920s. Filipinos were allowed to enter the country unlike other Asian groups at the time as a result of a U.S. colonization of the Philippines. However, despite being lawful residents, they still endured a great deal of discrimination. On the many farms in the region, many of these laborers were able to find employment. The arrival of large numbers of Filipino migrant workers in the Yakima Valley region of Washington state had created tension between the local white population and the newcomers. The Filipinos were viewed as a threat to local jobs and culture, and were subject to discrimination and violence. The Ku Klux Klan had been taking advantage of this pre-existing anti-Asian prejudice with the locals at the same time, claiming to shield white women from the dangers of interracial relationships and local men from the source of cheap labor. This culminated in a series of threats and intimidation by the KKK in the valley in November 1927. On the evening of November 8, a mob assembled at a boarded house owned by an interracial couple in the neighborhood and demanded that all Filipino boarders leave the area. Filipino workers were given death threats the entire week if they did not leave the valley. Most were coerced onto trains leaving town or simply left on foot. The mob targeted homes, businesses, and other gathering places, driving hundreds of Filipino migrant workers out of the area. The riot ultimately resulted in the expulsion of hundreds of Filipinos from the valley. The riot lasted for several days, during which time the local authorities did little to intervene or protect the Filipino community, which finally came to an end on November 11. The Filipino leaders were detained and tried following the incident. They were ultimately found guilty by a jury made up entirely of white people and given a 10-day jail sentence. In the end, hundreds of people were injured, several Filipino businesses were destroyed, and many migrants were forced to leave the area. The Yakima Valley riot had far-reaching consequences for the Filipino-American community and for race relations in the United States. The incident was widely covered in the press, drawing attention to the discrimination and violence faced by Filipinos and other immigrants. The riot also inspired a new wave of activism among Filipino Americans who organized in defense of their rights and worked to build solidarity with other marginalized communities. In the years following the Yakima Valley riot, the Filipino American community made significant strides toward greater visibility and representation. Filipino American leaders such as Carlos Bulusan and Philip Veracruz became prominent voices in the struggle for workers' rights and social justices. Additionally, the formation of organizations such as the Filipino Community of Seattle and the Filipino Community Center in San Francisco help to strengthen the community and provide a platform for political action. The violence and discrimination faced by the Filipino migrant workers in Yakima Valley serve as a wake-up call for many Americans who began to recognize the need for greater protection for immigrant rights and the dangers of unchecked xenophobia. While progress has been made since the Yakima Valley riot, the ongoing struggles for equality and justice for marginalized communities remind us of the importance of remaining vigilant and working together towards a more just and equitable society. I sincerely hope you liked today's video. So that we can create similar content, kindly support this channel. Thank you, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.